ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
When big news breaks around the world, we've got the time to get into what's happened.
I've seen lots of robust argument, but nothing like that.
The Kremlin propagandists are very happy.
And we can find out what it means for us in Australia.
I think we're like a kangaroo caught in the headlights.
What's perhaps more pertinent for Australia is ensuring that this kind of fracture that we've seen across the Atlantic is one that doesn't happen across the Pacific.
3.5 hours of Radio National breakfast condensed into a pop to the shops, maybe a tea break or a walk of the dog. You can find the new Breakfast Wrap podcast by searching for Radio National Breakfast in the ABC Listen app.
As Donald Trump moves to impose tariffs on Australian aluminium and steel imports this week, the government is still hoping for an exemption. So how should we be dealing with the US president? The former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, for one, isn't holding back. His criticism of Donald Trump has landed him in the president's firing line. But the real casualty of Trump's trade policies can be seen on the stock markets. Today, Chief Business Correspondent Ian Verrender on what's got the markets so worried and what a Trump recession could mean for all of us. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Ian, we had better start with Malcolm Turnbull.
I think China will take massive advantage of Trump.
He appeared on Bloomberg TV this week, of course, where he said that Donald Trump's chaotic leadership style would benefit China.
My prediction will be that President Xi will aim to be the exact opposite of Trump. Where Trump is chaotic, he will be consistent. Where Trump is rude and abusive, he'll be respectful. Where Trump is erratic, he will be consistent. And what that will do is build trust with countries, and there'll be many countries who will find China a more attractive partner.
What did you make of his comments?
Well, I think he's merely observing what's happening at the moment. I mean, you have seen a chaotic approach to global affairs and alliances from the Trump administration. I mean, we're only 6 weeks into to his reign in power, and everything has really been turned on its head.
Donald Trump, of course, was not too pleased with the comments from Malcolm Turnbull.
The president said Mr Turnbull never understood what was going on in China and was a, quote, weak and ineffective leader. The Post was
Ian, this comes as a tariff, of course, on Australian aluminium and steel. A 25% tariff is due to come into force by Thursday our time. But while Australia's been trying to get out of the tariff, Turnbull's gained his attention, of course. And then Malcolm Turnbull was questioned all about that on the ABC's 7:30 program by Sarah Ferguson.
Is it easier and better for Australia in this acute moment when the tariff decision is obviously being made if diplomacists are given the maximum opportunity to operate behind closed doors without your intervention?
I never thought I'd have to defend free speech here on the 7:30 report, and I'm glad you're...
And then on Radio National Breakfast with Sally Sara.
Was it reckless to be going to the media and offering criticism of Donald Trump in this pivotal week with this immediate tariff threat hanging over Australia?
Sally, I'm a little bit concerned by the way you raised this too, because Sarah Ferguson did the same thing last night. Are you suggesting that we should engage in self-censorship in Australia for fear of offending the huge ego of Donald Trump? Is that really the state that we've got to? Surely we should be free to speak the truth, or are we going to muzzle ourselves for fear of offending Mr. Trump?
It's sort of like, it's a balancing act, isn't it?
Well, it is. And I mean, there's no way that a federal government minister, probably even an opposition member as well, would be able to go publicly and attack America during such a delicate time. And I mean, you could accuse, Malcolm Turnbull of doing the wrong thing, I guess, but he's merely stating the obvious, really, isn't it? That, if you don't stand up to bullies, you just get bullied even more. And I think it's a pretty salient point.
We are now seeing somebody that is utterly unconstrained. And if the advice is to go and suck up to him, well, where does that get you? Are we just going to become, just a conga line of sycophants creeping through the White House, paying homage to this guy and telling him he's a genius? And, look, it's ludicrous.
Well, Ian, it is pretty clear now, isn't it, that the government is increasingly pessimistic that Donald Trump will grant an exemption against this tariff.
Yeah, that's right. The problem is that if you give Australia an exemption on steel and aluminium, then other countries will jump in and say, well, we want an exemption as well. And then you start handing out exemptions all over the place. And it seems as though the Trump administration is determined to just impose trade sanctions on everybody. While we're on the subject of trade sanctions, Sam, I think it's really interesting to point out that America at the moment is levelling trade sanctions on all of even its closest allies like Canada. But at the same time, Donald Trump is talking about lifting sanctions against Russia. So, there's sanctions against the friends, but lifting sanctions against, what has traditionally been, observed as a foe.
Effect that it is having on the American economy. The US president has declined to rule out that his economic policies, including these tariffs, of course, could cause a recession. He was asked about that on Fox News.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. It takes a little time. But I think it should be great for us. I think it should be great.
How significant was that?
I think it's really significant. For a man who, I better be careful with what I say, but for a man who often sprouts views that aren't correct or demonstrably incorrect, that was a really telling non-answer. Normally, you would expect him to say there will be no recession and the stock market will boom and it's going to be a great time for Americans. This is when, wealth will suddenly pile. It's the golden age. I would have expected that from him. And instead, he basically said, well, you might have to put up with some pain before we get to see the benefits. But, it's not just the tariffs that are involved here. It's a kind of triple-pronged approach. So you've got the tariff imposition, you've got a massive cut in government spending, and you've also got mass sackings. And what that has done, it's combined to seriously weaken consumer sentiment and confidence across America. Investors are just completely flummoxed by this approach. And so, as a result, you're seeing economists warning of a recession because consumer sentiment has turned down so seriously. And you've got stock market investors there just heading for the exits at the moment.
So tell me what is happening on the stock market right now. What have we seen?
Well, we've seen the broader Wall Street index, that's the S&P 500, that's almost at correction levels. And a correction is when you have a 10% fall from the peak. Now, the peak was in mid-February, February the 19th was the all-time high. It's been downhill ever since, and I think it's now just under 9% fall. So if this kind of move continues, we'd expect to see it officially in correction within the next couple of days or at least a week. And it takes 20% to get to crash kind of levels.
Whoa. Okay. So is that likely to get to that level of crash?
Well, part of the problem is that not only is Donald Trump saying we're going to impose 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico and, 10% on China, then there's another 10% on China, which adds to the 19% that were already in place. So you've pretty much doubled the tariffs on China now. Then you've said, we'll have a 1 month reprieve on Canada and Mexico. Oh, no, it's going to be back on the 2nd of March. It'll be another month reprieve till April the 2nd. Cars, we might, nobody seems to have any idea. Talk about chaotic.
Yes.
I mean, you couldn't script this if you wanted to make it more destabilising and uncertainty for an investment community. There seems to be no thought that's been put into this at all. And despite, even Malcolm Turnbull in the past has said that he has spoken to Donald Trump and warned him about tariffs and the negative impact that they have. And he just seems absolutely oblivious to the idea that this could make prices more expensive to your own consumers, to your own constituents. Tariffs themselves, there is absolutely no doubt that it's your own constituents, it's your own consumers that will pay the price for this. Now, goods that land in America from, say, China, if an American importer brings those goods into America, he or she has to pay the tariff when they land on the dock. And that person running that business will then pass those costs on to make a profit. So that's the one thing. So prices then go up. So you get an inflationary spike as a result of it. And it's also, because you're raising prices at this level, at this speed, you're going to see a downturn in global growth, and particularly in American growth. So the prospect of higher prices and a slowing growth raises the spectre of what's known as stagflation, where you have a slowing economy and inflation at the same time. And that's incredibly difficult to fix.
Right, so Ian, what does it mean for us, for our economy? And of course, we have potentially this tariff coming into force this week.
Yeah, look, that tariff is not going to, the steel and aluminium tariffs won't affect us individually that much. Our exports to America aren't huge. It's a very small proportion of our total exports. Where this starts to become problematic is America is the world's biggest economy. And so if you get a recession there, the old saying, if America sneezes, we catch a cold. If there's a downturn in America and if inflation starts to spike in America, that's going to flow through to the rest of the global economy. So that's one thing. So we would feel that impact. The second big impact is that now with these huge tariffs on China, that's going to affect the Chinese economy, which isn't going particularly well anyway. So consumers are not spending and prices are dropping. That is, you shouldn't say catastrophic, I guess, but it's certainly not very good, because when you see prices dropping, what would your instinct be? Well, mine would be, why should I buy this fridge or buy, this car or whatever it is now? It's going to be cheaper next month. I'll wait till then. And if everybody does that en masse, that just accelerates a downturn in the economy. And so that's not great for China. So that will certainly impact Australia, because China is far and away our biggest trading partner. Now, if China then retaliates with tariffs of its own, it just feeds into this global kind of situation where everybody's imposing tariffs, everybody's economy is slowing down. That's not going to be great for us.
No, so the world needs the US to avoid a recession, but can it? Donald Trump's not so sure.
He's not. And, you've also got to realise the amount of money that we have invested in America, particularly through our superannuation funds. Now, something like $7 out of every $10 that's in our superannuation funds heads offshore. And the biggest magnet for global funds has been Wall Street, because it has been far and away the best performing stock market. And the biggest component of Wall Street by a country mile has been the what's known as the Magnificent Seven, these big 7 technology companies. So we've seen a bubble form around these technology stocks, and a lot of our superannuation money is going into that.
So what do you think, Ian? Will Trump let this keep going on? Will he let the markets actually crash?
He's been told so many times that, this could cause a recession, that tariffs on their own, you pay for them, not the other side. He refuses to believe that. He's now witnessing this going on in real time, and he's, as we've just spoken about, refused to rule out a recession at home. I don't know. It looks like he's absolutely determined to proceed with this. I mean, he seems to be advised by people who are convinced that this is the way to go.
Ian Verrender is the ABC's chief business correspondent. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Adair Shepherd. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.